Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Well, you are in for a real treat. I have the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. Josh Fonger. Josh, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here, David.
So give us a little bit of a professional backstory. What brought you to the work that you're doing today? And then what were some interesting pit stops along the way?
Yeah, well, I won't go through the whole story, but my undergraduate degree is in architecture. And so I thought I was going to be an architect, but then I realized that having a lot of kids, we've got 4 kids now, and wanting to be able to afford that, probably couldn't do it on an architect's salary because I was making more waiting tables. So I immediately got into real estate development, and then that crashed in 2007, 8, and had to reinvent myself because you can't really do much with an architecture degree. I got my master's in business, and so I applied for jobs around the world. No one would hire me. And eventually, after losing everything, house, a car, not my family, the car, all my savings, basically living in my in-laws' condo, after much soul searching, I eventually got a job as a business consultant, which is ironic because I didn't want to be a business consultant. My dad didn't like them. My father-in-law didn't like them. I wrote my thesis paper about why you shouldn't hire them, why it's a waste of money. And I had no interest to be a business consultant, and I was terrified of being on stage, terrified of speaking. And, I was 26. So at the time, it was not really the plan I had for my life, but, got other plans. And through a whole series of providential situations, I ended up getting hired as a contractor to be a business consultant with a very small boutique firm that focused on flooring stores, of all things. And, managed to do really well and really loved doing what I did. And so I was gone probably 15 days a month, flying around to different companies around the country, actually around the world. And I would help them with anything and everything. So I became a voracious consumer of books because I'd have to fly out somewhere and teach them about outside sales. Then I'd fly out somewhere else, teach them about inside sales. Then I would have to help them with their budget. Then I'd help them through bankruptcy. Then I'd help them do transition plans from parents to kids, help them with their inventory management. You name it, I would just have to be the guy to fix stuff. And it was really fun work, very difficult work. And I seemed to do good enough to actually people have success and really loved it. And that is what brought me eventually to work with the author of this book, Work the System, Sam Carpenter. That's what I do right now is work with Sam. I was just traveling around the country and getting burned out and was not good for health, family, anything. And basically, it was one of those things where I've been on the road a long time, canceled flights, sickness, family issues. My flights got screwed up. I had to land, I think, in LA, but I had a client meeting the next morning in San Diego. So I'm driving in the middle of the night from one airport to another airport. And I had to go to Washington the next day. And I'm just like 3 a.m. driving. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. I'm killing myself. And, just praying, asking for another opportunity. And that's when I was like, you know what? I'm going to start my own company. And built a plan to start my own company and knew of Sam Carpenter. I lived in Bend, Oregon at the time and met him for coffee, told him my idea. And he said, it's a terrible idea, Josh. You definitely should not do that. And you're going to fail. It's going to destroy your life. And I was like, no, I really think this is what I should do. And I continued pursuing it for a few more months. And then eventually Sam called me. This is probably 2010, 10, 11, something like that. And he said, how about you work with me and we'll get this book, Work the System out there and help companies because people keep calling me and they want help with their companies. And that was the beginning of our relationship and the beginning of working with Sam. And, 1,000 companies later, really love that work. And that's what I do today.
Amazing. Well, we have so much to talk about. I'd love to start by getting your perspective on transitioning from being an employee to being a business consultant. And what is that like in your experience as you're working with consultants? And what are some pitfalls and some surprises, both good and bad, when people leave the corporate world enter the entrepreneurial consulting world?
Yeah, that's a great question. A lot to unpack there. So for me, as going from employee to consultant, as soon as I was a consultant, I immediately knew I have to make six figures, period, because I have some kids and I have a lot of debt and I just need to do it. And so I did. It was kind of sheer will, sheer hunger, and my first task was, here's 3,000 phone numbers, start calling and sell them this budget model. And if you do it, you get to keep 50%. And the owner of the company caught 50%. And I did because I needed to. And I think that's the number one, because I certify consultants around the world in our method. And that's the number one thing I see is those who are hungry, they can do really well. Those who are kind of like, well, I'm just going to take it slow and I'm going to figure it out. And they don't do as well because they're not actually talking to the people who need help. And therefore, they can't help anybody. And it has to do with fear. It has to do with not confidence in themselves. It has to do with a number of different things. But I think the number one element to a successful consultant, beyond just prerequisites, is they need to talk to their ideal customer, a lot of them. And then once they talk to their ideal customer, they need to follow up until the timing's right. Because with consulting services, it can be the service they definitely need, but it just can be the wrong time for it. And that's a big part of consulting, is that if you don't push hard to ramp up to get a base level of clients, you're just going to fail ultimately. But when I certify consultants, some of them, they really need a full-time income right away. Some of them, they're in their 60s and they want to have fun. They want to have an impact. They want to coach some people. And so they're fine with just a handful of clients and they're just waiting for clients to come to them. And that's a fine model as well. And that's what I love about consulting, is that it's unregulated. You can do it however you want to. You can work as many hours as you want to. You can do virtual. You can do on-site. You can niche down to an industry. You can be broad. And it's up to you. So total creativity. But now I'm just kind of trailing off, giving you a whole bunch of spiel on consulting.
No, that's great. I am curious because of your thesis. The thesis that you did in school is absolutely do not use consultants. Consultants are a waste of time. Take us back to that thesis and what was give us a little bit of a rant about what was in that thesis.
If I can remember back then, the main thrust of it essentially was everything they're going to tell you, you already know, because the majority of what they do is boilerplate answers to common problems and interviewing your staff and then rewriting what their staff says. So essentially, you can talk to your own staff and they can tell you all this stuff. And they're just copying and pasting. That's what I did in my research, is I would look at these, reports that were $50,000, $100,000 reports, and they were identical to each other to a whole range of companies. And sometimes they didn't even take the company names out properly, like essentially the same names, like they forgot to edit their own report. They were just like copy, paste, print. And I said, this is not worth it. Actually, the best way to create change would be to internally work with your team and internally, grow these best practices with your own team, not from the outside. That all being said, I still agree that that's important and essential, but there is certain work that consultants can do from the outside because they do have an outside perspective. They do have outside expertise that your internal team doesn't have. And often they can be way more honest because they're not working there, whereas the employees can't. They just tell the owner what the owner wants to hear or their manager wants to hear. And so they oftentimes can't be as honest. And oftentimes the consultant can provide a sounding board for leadership that leadership can't tell to the rest of their staff because of the privacy of it, especially business owners who I work with directly, is they can't share a lot with their team that's going on. And therefore, they need to digest these things and plan out these initiatives with someone who's not working within the four walls for them to really move things forward. So there are a lot of uses for consultants, but at the time, my early 20s, that was the side I took.
Right. Well, and that might be just from naivete or just, general inexperience. But I think that is still valid today because, of course, there are bad consultants. There are bad consultants who do exactly what you say. They don't have any process expertise. They don't have any sophisticated systems that the business owner or the company can benefit from. So it's kind of like the brain on a stick. Hey, ask me questions and I'll answer your questions, versus proactively changing the trajectory of a company's future.
Yeah, definitely. And that was one of the big transitions between me doing my traveling consulting with these flooring stores to working with Sam Carpenter, is I was noticing that my companies, we'd have big successes, their sales would go up, their expenses would go down. Something great would happen with the company, and I'd be working with them for a few months. Then I would stop. But then I would hear about them a year or two later, and they were right back to where they were before. And I was like, I'm missing something here. And it really hit me hard when a company that I had taken through a reorganization through bankruptcy, and they shut down some locations, but they were able to grow back, had a culture transformation, developed all these things for the company. And it was like, this company is going to do really well. And then I looked at the owner's profile, popped up on my LinkedIn, I want to say like 5 years later. And instead of being a business owner, very successful business owner, Southern California, now he was a salesperson at someone else's company, essentially with a, $300,000 a year less pay cut. Maybe more than that, right? So it's basically, he dropped way down, and now he's just a sales guy in his late 50s, as opposed to owning 9 locations, 10 years earlier. And I realized the thing that I was missing is that I never took it to the level of documenting the systems that made up the business to provide the stability, the infrastructure, the transferability, the insurance, the training, onboarding, all the things that we do now. Is not just talk about how to improve your sales or talk about how to do marketing, but we're actually going to take these ideas that are in your team's head and in your head and solidify them, codify them in a way such that your company can grow. And this is kind of the premise of Sam's book, is that your company can grow, you can make more, and you as an owner can work less. Like, you're going to mathematically not be tied to your business in a way where you have to always be there. Your business will continue to grow apart from you. And then you can choose to either be highly involved, or you can do other things, other initiatives, start other companies, but the business will no longer be you. You will now be the owner, the manager of your business, as opposed to it basically running and potentially ruining your life, which it does oftentimes.
Are you loving this interview as much as I am? Holy smokes. Hey, you know what this reminds me of? There's a fantastic sales book that you got to get your hands on right here, right now. It's called Do It Selling. How do I know it's great? Well, I wrote it, and you need to read it. Pop over right now to doitselling.com. Now, back to our interview. I think it's a difference between someone who is just kind of working in the day-to-day versus build the system, run the system, build the system, run the system. Everyone talks about this, and I definitely know that systems is something that we'll talk about here in a minute. A lot of folks, what they want to do is they want to build a quote unquote machine. It's like, Josh, I just want to build a lead generation machine. I just want to build a sales machine. I just want to build a talent machine. So we always get the right clients and customers. We always get the best employees. We don't have to worry about these things. We're not running and scrambling and Hail Mary here and Hail Mary there. And I hope this works. And gosh, let's try this, and constantly pulling new tricks out of their hat. Some entrepreneurs are wired that way, where they enjoy, or they think that's what the game is let's keep pulling new things out of our hat. Let's throw spaghetti against the wall. Some of it's going to work. Some of it's not going to work. But I'm guessing that when folks read the book and when folks talk to you, they realize, oh my gosh, I've been wasting so much time, so much effort, so much energy. If I really had a quote unquote machine, the machine runs on systems. The machine does not run on that entrepreneur's brilliant idea of the month.
Exactly. Yeah. You just said the answer for me. It doesn't discount the need for innovation and the need for brilliant ideas and the need for experimentation. It's just that most of your company doesn't need to be that way. The way you answer the phone doesn't have to be different every single time, right? The way that you process a check or do a refund, or the way that you do these things doesn't have to always be totally different and starting from scratch. Most of the things that you do in your personal life, in your business, and in your team's life should be very consistent. And then you can use that, that intelligence that you have, instead of putting out the constant friction and problems that you create by not having things managed well. You can use that towards new initiative, new projects, new innovations, because the core business is stable. It's the new stuff that you as the entrepreneur can work on, not the old stuff that just keeps breaking. And so we really try to let people know that those ideas are good, but just your team doesn't need constant fluctuation. Your team likely needs stability. Most people are nothing like entrepreneurs, and that's great. That's fine. But don't treat them like they are, because then you're going to have chaos. And that's what a lot of small companies have.
Absolutely. Let me go back to the hungry consultant, because I love what you said. Some consultants, obviously, they enter the consulting field, they enter entrepreneurship wanting to make a full-time living and needing to make a full-time living. They need to make that six-figure or multi-six-figure income. Others are fine as a side hustle, or, hey, they're semi-retired. They want to work 10, 20 hours a week. They need to make, 50K, 100K. They're totally happy there. But there are people, and you put your finger on it just very lightly, I want to go deeper into it. There are people that are hungry, that do need a full-time income, but they're scared out of their minds. They're either scared of prospecting, they don't know where to find leads, they're afraid of sales. In my Do It Marketing book, I even have the chapter on sales is called the S word, because so many entrepreneurs, they love the business of their business. They just don't like the marketing and sales part. So for the folks that are paralyzed by fear, or for the folks that are just resistant, it's like, I'm a consultant. I used to be a CEO. This whole sales thing is beneath me. Talk us through that psychology and how you work with some of the consultants that you certify to get their mindset right about what that's really about.
This is a challenge. It's a challenge for anybody. It goes, I think, a layer deeper into, are you doing it for you, or are you doing it for them? And if you're doing it for you, you will feel uncomfortable. You will not like doing the calls or the emails. I mean, it's not going to be much fun for you. But if you flip it and say, hey, these people, whether it's your warm network, your cold network, they need help. They need something that I have. They need my gifts, my talents, my skills. And I'm doing this for them. And then when you get on the phone with them, you ask them the questions that really draws that out. Then it's more enjoyable. You're like, hey, I'm getting an opportunity to use what I've been given during my limited time here on this earth to do something good. And I don't want to waste it, right? I don't want to waste it. So then it's less about the fear of rejection. It's more about the excitement of helping people. That's the shift. And now that's a battle that people have to face pretty regularly, because it's like, I don't want to do this. And you're right. Who wants to, look at a list of phone numbers and reach voicemails and whatever that might be, or, do a whole email sequence and not get responses or build all of this stuff. And the thing is, it's work, but it's work with a purpose. It's work to actually help people. And so I think that's a big, important shift. And I think the other shift people need to realize is that when someone says no to you or doesn't buy your services, doesn't mean they don't like you. It just means that they don't either need the service ever, or they don't need the service right now. And so you have to really separate your consulting from you as a person. And so they're very different things. And I think people just take them and they combine them. And therefore it's shattering and uncomfortable to not make the sale, or not have a yes, or not have the phone answered for you. And so there are some segmentations that have to happen. But then, I tell my consultants who I'm certifying that, they'll make like 10 phone calls and they'll say, hey, it didn't work. Or they'll do one live event and say, hey, it didn't work. And I say, it's a numbers game. You really do have to talk to a number of people, thousands of people potentially, and in terms of how you're touching them. If it's online, it's going to be thousands. If it's over the phone, it's going to be hundreds. And if it's going to be face-to-face in a really ideal room, it might be tens of people. But you have to actually talk to enough people to get that yes. And you have to do it for a long period of time to get that yes. And so don't go into it having the wrong expectations. Right? That was one of the key things for me when I first started consulting. And this is, back before email marketing was really a big thing. We do a lot of email marketing now, but it was just a phone list. And I knew after I'd done it long enough that if I, called 100 people, then I would get X number of phone calls, which lead to X number of webinars, which would lead to X number of, contracts, which lead to X number of closes, which would lead to X number of amount of money in my pocket. And so this is just what it is. Like I have to make this many calls, period. Now I can get better at the way I do the things, but I think oftentimes people, they don't have that expectation properly met. They just assume, well, at least 10% will want to buy my services. Well, maybe not. Maybe it's 1/10 of 1%. You just don't know, and you haven't done it long enough to figure that out. And of course, you want to improve those things and dial them in. But I think that people don't have the right expectations and they take it personally and all the things I just mentioned, which I could rattle off again. But that's probably the key thing for someone making the shift. On top of that, they need to have the prerequisite skills. I wouldn't say they need to be amazing for someone to buy them, buy their services or, pay to work with them. Because I know I just started my 20s. And but I look back, I'm thinking, wow, I'm really surprised these people hired me because, I was really green. But the point is, the reason why is because I had one person saying, hey, Josh is good. Like that was the guy who ran the consulting firm. He's like, yeah, you should work with Josh. He's good. So I had somebody saying that I was good. I had an MBA, I had some credentials, and I had a service that they need. Hey, we need sales management training. Josh does sales management training. And he's talking to me on the phone right now. Right. So it was as simple as that. I had the prerequisite abilities, and then it just comes down to numbers. And so a new consultant, just make sure you have the prerequisites, as in you have the appropriate certification or training, and you're talking to the right audience, and you have at least somebody or something of authority saying this person is worth working with. And then your prerequisites are covered. Then it just comes down to the numbers.
For sure. Well, I always say that one of the big mistakes people make is not enough prospecting activity, which includes zero prospecting activity. And then they wonder, well, boy, it's really hard to make sales. It's like, yeah, it's really hard to make sales with zero outreach and waiting to be found, waiting by the phone, waiting on your LinkedIn account for a little message to come in from the universe. So I know part of what you help companies with and part of what your consultants help companies with is marketing systems and sales systems. Going back to your original 3,000 phone numbers in the bad old days, tell us a little bit about what does intelligent prospecting or what does an intelligent prospecting system look like? We're not trying to call everybody. So client selection, targeting is really important. That initial outreach of what you say or what you send is really important. Give us a little flavor of that lead generation system that you recommend for your consultants.
Yeah, definitely. And this goes for my consultants or any of the small businesses that we work with, is when they say we want more sales, then I let them know there's a series of steps that lead up to sales. And so the easiest thing to do is, if you want more sales immediately, is to look at the step right before the sale, which is the close, right? So you look at who didn't you close? That's probably, if you want to get money now, just go to anybody who almost closed, said they were going to close. There you go. That's the closest distance. Then a step before that is presentations. Who did you not present to that said they wanted to hear more? Then you go a step back, and then you go a step back further. Who was warm, but you never actually got to the presentation stage? So you can go back a few steps in the chain, and you can identify who those people have been or were in the past if you want to make sales quickly. That's not building a machine, but that's just making sure that you understand there are quicker ways to go out making sales. And oftentimes the quickest way is people who previously bought from you, which people tend to not go back to, but there's always opportunity there. But if I want to build out an actual selling system, that's where I'll start with my consultants, especially, as I'll say, hey, let's just start with people who are warm, like they know you, like you, trust you. Let's people who are ideal customers, and let's take them from warm to like a presentation to a close. Let's just stick in that range. Let's work the system in that area. You don't need 700 consulting clients. You can make six figures with 2, right? Maybe even 1. So don't feel like you need to build a whole machine and spend a lot of money on ads, have a podcast, do all this stuff. That's pretend work. You're not actually helping anybody. So why don't you start where the real work is, which is people who need you, and they're already right in front of your face. So that's where I start. But with companies that want to build out a machine, an actual system, then we walk through each of the different elements that make up a sale, and each company is a little bit different, but there does need to be a kind of an outreach or a client attraction beginning point. So how do we acquire leads? Whether that's purchasing lists, or that's running ads, or that's, whatever that might be, networking. But you need to find a way to get traffic first. And ideally, more than one way. If you just have one way, as soon as that dries up, like maybe you get traffic through networking, well, then COVID happens. Or maybe you get traffic through Facebook ads, they change the algorithm, and then you got a problem. We have one of my consultants is working with somebody they were doing really well. Now they're losing $30,000 a day because Facebook changed the algorithm. That's a bummer, right? If you have one traffic source, you're going to be in trouble. So first thing, traffic source. Next thing is making sure you sort your traffic source. Do you have a system for doing that? Right? Because not all leads are created equal, right? Your best friend owns a business that would be ideal to work with, probably a good lead versus somebody who just sent you a message on LinkedIn, right? So make sure you have a way to sort the leads you get in so that you give them proper prioritization. Maybe they're fresh, they're new, maybe they're highly qualified. That's the next thing. The next step would be warming them. How are you going to warm them? Newsletter, phone call, email, face-to-face, like identify the elements, build a system that you can keep going. You don't want to be all over the map. You want to have a consistent way to do all these things. After you warm them, and it's going to be the appointment, the presentation, the closing, all the different things that we talked about. And so when I'm looking at a business or with one of my consultants, I say, well, where's the hole in this area? First off, where are you really screwing up? Because if we can identify that, we have a major solution, a major win in our hands. And so we want to start with that. So solve that problem. And then where is the next bottleneck going to be? Solve that one. Where is the next bottleneck going to be? Sometimes it's new leads. Sometimes it's the presentation. Sometimes it's, following up to close. Sometimes it's a way to warm them. But without looking through their current activities, I don't know. And so I have them break apart the activities that make up the sale. And then we want to make sure that they're all at an adequate level. And we're going to document them. Then we're going to perfect them. But I've seen all sorts of problems all along the horizon. And they think, I just need to get a new ads person. I just need to get some more marketing. It's like, no, it's breaking down right here. Case in point, I had a dental office where they had been in business for 30 years and said, we just need to spend more money on ads, more money on people to see our business. And I said, how many patients have you had? And they've had like 3,000 patients or something like that, 4,000, a lot of them. And I said, have you ever called them before? Like the patients who don't come back, the patients who have treatment plans? No, never done that. Well, how about we just call the patients who had a diagnosis, like they need a crown and they need braces, who knows what, root canal. Just call them and say, hey, we didn't see you come back in and we're running a special this month and we have some appointments. Would you like to come in? Here's 3 available spots. Okay. That's it. They just did that. Never had a month that good in their entire business career. Just call the ones that are right at the finish line that just never finished. He thought it was, I need to get more leads. And so I think that's oftentimes there are simple solutions. This is where a consultant comes in. Anybody can do this. You're an outside person. You can look at it and say, hey, they're missing something here. And oftentimes they just can't see it because they're always done it a certain way. Their team has always done it a certain way and they don't see it. And so that's the kind of work that it's really fun for me to do. And, that is what gave them their best year ever. It's just calling people who already needed the service. They just didn't close.
Client reactivation campaign or past patient reactivation campaign. Let's say that this is a new business, either a new business or a new consultant. I want to go back to your own background as a consultant for retail flooring stores, which is super narrow, super specific. Talk about niche versus broad, right? Because a lot of consultants and even a lot of businesses, they try and boil the ocean. Boy, every warm body with a check, they're going to be our next customer. They're going to be our next client. And consultants often say, well, everyone needs leadership. I'm a leadership consultant. I'm a systems consultant. Everyone needs systems. And they overwhelm themselves because when they go broad, where everyone needs this, anyone can use this, they literally have no idea where to begin. Retail flooring, I know where to network. I know where to publish. I know where to do webinars. I know all kinds of things. My life becomes simple. Talk about what's the current advice about niche versus broad in your perspective.
Yeah, well, a lot of advice, I would recommend it from a book. And I think the guy's name is David Baker. If I screwed it up, I'm sorry. That book is called The Business of Expertise.
Yes.
And if you haven't had him on the show, I would recommend it. I had him on my show a couple of years ago. Have you had him on the show?
We have had him on the show. Brilliant guy. I mean, crazy smart and really, really good stuff in the book.
Yeah. So that's a great book. Anyone who's a consultant, they should read that one. There's either method consultant, which I would consider myself a method consultant, or there is kind of like industry consultant. And then there's a whole mix in between. And I try to push my consultants to pick certain verticals because I tell them I didn't. And look at me, right? I've got digital marketing firms and I have, people who do farming. You name it, I have it. I have dentists, chiropractors, real estate investors. It's all over the map. I love it. And a system's a system. And I can help a lot of these companies. Like I've got a guy who sells and maintains car washes right now. So a lot of different companies. A hearing aid center, right? Great business. But the point is, you're going to have a difficult time working for larger companies if you don't niche down to a vertical. Because the bigger the company is, the more they're scrutinizing your credentials, the more they're scrutinizing your history, the more they want to see case studies specific to that industry, and the more they're going to shop around for the best of the best consultants. So if you're like, I'm an anybody consultant, well, they're going to say, no, we have this industry. We need a consultant who not only is an HR expert, they're an HR expert in, you name it, in the insurance industry or whatever. And so you're not going to get the big companies if you're just broad. You're going to have to be a specific expertise aligned with a specific vertical. And that's what I try to get my clients to do. But it's amazing with the vertical. We had someone who got certified and she owned a Pilates studio and she just went to people who own Pilates studios and said, hey, I can help organize your business. She got 3 clients the first weekend. It wasn't because she had a vertical Pilates. She had a specific expertise, which is how to organize and systemize that business. Super simple to get clients that way. So I push people that way, but there is a downside. The big downside is you have that industry tank, you could be in some big trouble. One of the people got certified with us, really want to specialize in hotels and hospitality. He's got all his marketing materials. He's going out, hitting the street right as COVID was starting. That wasn't a great time. They were not looking to spend money, right? They were not interested in his services at a particular time. They were interested in cutting and just surviving. He didn't do well with that. I said, you think, that's a fine vertical. It's not a fine vertical right now. You really need to branch out to verticals that you tend to do the best in, are verticals that are expanding, verticals that are growing, and they want to grow even better or even faster. And so that's where consultants can find some success. So I personally diversified, which has been great. But the one part that I niched down on is helping consultants be consultants with our method, right? So there's my niche is certifying consultants and helping them be successful. But beyond that one singular niche of consulting, helping consultants be consultants is just small business owners that resonate with me and my podcast, and they just want to work with Josh.
Well, and they also want to work the system, right? To go back to your company name. So it's what I'm picking up from you, Josh, is you either want to be known to a certain audience, and for that vertical market, you can do several different things, or be known for a certain methodology. That methodology could be applied to lots of different industries, but you have deep expertise in installing that methodology in a wide variety of companies.
Exactly. That's very succinct of you. That's perfect. Yeah. So basically, if somebody says, hey, I read this book, Work the System. I see that you're on the book, Josh, all the case studies. This is what I want in my business. Then I'm your guy, right? So that's very simple. But I found that when I kind of dilute myself into saying, hey, yeah, you want to be more organized? I can help with that. A little more productive. Sure. And then I'm just kind of whatever. Well, they're not going to pay my fees. And then I'm competing with 1,000 other productivity consultants, right? So that's really pointless. And so I really stick with, hey, this method works. We've done it with thousands of companies. So if this is what you want, I'm your guy. If you're just looking for productivity, something or other, then go read a book on it or watch a podcast, but it's not going to be worth us working together.
Right. Well, as we're wrapping up, I would love you to share just a couple of different ways that you work with folks. So tell us a little bit about the group coaching program, the consulting that you do, the one-on-one work, the certification work. What are all the different avenues that you share this expertise with folks?
Great question. And what we determined is that because we're method consultants and because it's based on a book, which people can get at workthesystem.com or WTSenterprises.com, we said, well, people are curious about the book. there's going to be certain, paths they're going to want to take. One, they just want a consultant coach to work directly with them on their business. And that's great. I raised my hand. I'm the guy. And I really enjoy that personal work. If they are a larger company, maybe they're doing 10, 20, $50 million a year in sales, and they need somebody to actually teach and train and coach their managers, oversee larger projects, larger installations of this method, then that's consulting work. And those are custom projects. And so I do a lot of that work. And then a lot of my consultants do that work as well. And then if they just say, hey, love this book, I want to be a consultant too, I certify them. And then if they have smaller companies and they really want to go through a structured training program for their small business and they learn better in a group environment, then we do group training. It's a 120-day program. We break up our business, basically 25% revenue through each of those 4 different ways that we utilize the book. And that gives us a lot of stability, allows us to work with a lot of different types of folks who resonate with the book. That seems to have been the best recipe for our business.
Holy smokes, so much value in this episode. Listen, if you are loving what you're hearing, feel free to download, subscribe, tell a friend, leave a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to The Selling Show. Now, back to the interview. 2 final questions as we're wrapping up. The final question is, where can people get connected and stay connected to more Josh and more Work the System? But before we get to that, if our listeners were to take one core concept from our larger conversation today, what would you hope that one big takeaway idea would be?
The one big takeaway from anybody is that if they're having dysfunction in their personal life, their business, disorder, in any area of their life, the first thing they want to do is step back, get outside and slightly elevated, and look down and see the separate systems that are making up their life and their business. And we call it a systems mindset, so that they can very easily diagnose their own problem and hopefully figure out, this is my problem, and then they can tackle it. It's very difficult to make a business better, but it's very simple to make one sliver of your business better. And so that's what we are all about. And so I would say, if you can get the systems mindset, then that's going to be the number one takeaway, because it's going to transform the way you parent your kids, the way you have relationships, the way you do a lot of things.
Brilliant. So where can people go to get more Josh Fonger brilliance? Let's talk about the book. Let's talk about website, goodies, downloads, resources. What can we leave people with?
Yeah, definitely. Well, then go to my website, senterprises.com. There we have the book, Work the System, available for download of the summary, right? And so that would be a great spot to go if you just want to get in the door, hear about it for free, and then you'll be on my email list. I'll let you know about upcoming events. We do a live event every year and things of that nature. And if you want to connect directly with the author of the book, Sam Carpenter, and he sends out a really great video once a week about how to systemize your life and how to systemize your business. Really fun videos. Go to workthesystem.com. You can also get on his database and hear about that and get the summary of the book. And he's also I don't know if it's a limited time, but he's giving away the audio of the first 28 minutes of his book as well for free right now. I just saw that on his website. So that's pretty cool. You don't even need to opt in for that. That's just a 20-minute download of the audio. So I would recommend that as well.
Awesome. And all of those are going to be one click away in the show notes right under this episode at thesellingshow.com. Josh Fonger, you are fantastically brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your genius with us.
Thanks, David. I enjoyed it.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.